Ladies and gentlemen, announcing the arrival of Yang Berhormat Datuk Sri Ladies and gentlemen, announcing the arrival of Yang Berhormat Datuk Sri Saifuddin Abdullah, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Malaysia, accompanied by the VIPs. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Yang Berhormat Datuk Sri Saifuddin Abdullah, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Malaysia. Yang Amat Mulia Tunku Zainal Abidin Ibni Tuanku Muhriz, Founding President of the Institute for Democracy and Economic Affairs Ideas. Honorable Professor Emeritus Tan Sri Datuk Zulkifli Abdul Razak, Rector of the International Islamic University Malaysia. Mr. Thomas Andrews, United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Myanmar. Honorable Tan Sri Dr. Syed Hamid Albar, former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Malaysia, Chairman World Islamic Economic Foundation and Chairman of the Malaysian Advisory Group on Myanmar. Yang Berhormat Ustaz Tarmizi Sulaiman, Chairman of APPGM on Refugee Policy, Your Excellency, Yang Berhormat and honorable guests, members of the media, participants, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh, and welcome to the high-level roundtable on refugee education, moving the agenda forward. I am Daniel Baharudin, and I will be your master of ceremony for today's event. Ladies and gentlemen, the high-level roundtable on refugee education, moving the agenda forward, is an event organized by the All-Party Parliamentary Group Malaysia, APPGM, on refugee policy and the International Islamic University Malaysia, in collaboration with the Malaysian Ministry of Foreign Affairs in conjunction with the World Refugee Day 2022. This event is intended to move forward with discussions and initiatives on refugee education in the context of Malaysia's commitment to inclusive education and the realization of Sustainable Development Goal 4, namely to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promoting lifelong learning opportunities for all. The roundtable will also include a diverse range of prominent and knowledgeable speakers where they will engage in a dialogue to identify the problems as well as to explore the innovative initiatives toward the common goal of advancing access to education for refugees in Malaysia. Members of the floor, I am also happy to announce that there are several public and private agencies that are involved in our roundtable discussion today. And I would also like to take this opportunity to promote the painting exhibition, in which is located just outside the Senate Hall, where the paintings are made by the fellow refugees. Members of the floor, to get the blessings for our event today, I would like to invite Ustaz Muhammad Naim from Yayasan Isra Malaysia for the dua recitation. Please welcome.
الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. وقال ربكم ادعوني أستجب لكم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد في الأولين والآخرين وسلم. ورضي الله تبارك وتعالى عن ساداتنا أصحاب سيدنا رسول الله أجمعين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا حامدين حمدا شاكرين حمدا صالحين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافئ مزيده. يا ربنا لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك الكريم وعظيم سلطانك. يا رحمن يا فتاح يا عليم. Ya Allah, ya Tuhan kami, hanya padamu ya Allah kami panjangkan kesyukuran di atas segala rahmat dan nikmat-Mu pada pagi ini. Ya Allah, ya Ghaffar, ya Rahim, kami keluarkanlah kami dari kegelapan kejahilan-Mu ya Allah. Muliakanlah kami dengan cahaya kefahaman ilmu-Mu ya Allah, dan bukakanlah hati kami dengan ma'rifah ilmu, dan sinarilah hati-hati kami dengan cahaya petunjuk-Mu ya Allah, seperti mana yang telah Engkau sinari bumi-Mu ini dengan cahaya matahari sepanjang zaman ya Allah. Ya Allah, ya Rahman, ya Rahim, kami memohon dengan qudrat dan iradat-Mu ya Allah, berkatilah kami, berikanlah kami kekuatan dan ketabahan hati untuk menghadapi segala bentuk perjuangan bagi mencari dan meminta ilmu pengetahuan, serta permudahkanlah kami untuk beramal dengan penuh dengan keikhlasan ya Allah. Ya Allah, ya Tuhan kami, jadikanlah semua peserta yang hadir ke majlis kami pada pagi ini ya Allah pemimpin-pemimpin kami, agar mereka terus berkhidmat dengan istiqamah untuk menabur bakti dan membangunkan umat, masyarakat, agama dan juga bangsa-Mu ya Allah. Rabbana hab lana min azwajina wa dhurriyyatina qurrata a'yun waj'alna lil muttaqina imama. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب الدنيا وقنا عذاب القبور وقنا عذاب المحشر وقنا عذاب النار. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. تقبل الله منكم.
Thank you, Ustaz Naim, for the dua recitation. Ladies and gentlemen, let us begin our event today with the opening remarks by Yang Berhormat Ustaz Tarmizi bin Sulaiman, the Chair of APPGM on Refugee Policy. Please welcome.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And a very good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yang berhormat Datuk Seri Saifuddin Abdullah, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Malaysia. Yang amat mulia Tunku Zainal Abidin Ibni Tunku Mukriz. Honorable Professor Emeritus Tan Sri Datuk Zulkifli Abdul Razak, Rector of the International Islamic University Malaysia. Mr. Thomas Andrew, United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Myanmar. Honorable Tan Sri Dr. Syed Hamid Alba, former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Malaysia. Mr. Thomas Everett, UNHCR Malaysia Representative. Your Excellency yang berhormat and honorable guests, member of media, participant, brother and sister, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank the organizer for this event, the Secretariat of all party parliamentary groups Malaysia on Refugees Policy, the Malaysian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Islamic University Malaysia as the host of this prestigious event. I would like to welcome all the invited speakers, participants, and audience for this high-level roundtable on refugees education, moving the agenda forward in conjunction with the World Refugees Day 2022. I feel grateful to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala for giving His blessing to us together in this blessing event, with full attention to obey His command in perfecting the Ummah. I believe that this is a great opportunity for us to discuss critical international issues involving several humanitarians, foreign affairs, protection, and educational concern. I would like to open my opening remarks today with the verse from the Holy Quran in Surah Al-Anfal, verse 74, that's mentioned, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَهَجَرُوا وَجَهَدُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَالَّذِينَ آوَوا وَالنَّصَارُوا أُولَئِكَ هُمُ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ حَقًّا لَهُمْ مَغْفِرَةٌ وَرِزْقٌ كَرِيمٌ. Those who believe, migrate, and struggle in the cause of Allah, and those who give them shelter and help, they are the true belief. They will have forgiveness and honorable provision. In short, in the verse, convey the humans, Muslim who protect migrant, consider belief. I believe that this session is very important for us to continue the collaborative commitment at the international level, especially when we discuss the welfare of our refugees, especially when dealing with academic knowledge. For instance, I would like to highlight the statistic on refugees situation nowadays that has been published by the UN Refugees Agency, UNHCR. There are currently 89.3 million possibly displaced people worldwide at the of 2021 as a result of persecution, conflict, violence, human rights violation, or events seriously disturbing public order. For the numbers, there are 27.1 million having status as refugees, while others internally displaced people and asylum seekers. In Europe, 26.6 million refugees in mid-2021 and 40 million internal displaced persons due to conflict at the end of 2020. Turkey has hosted the large numbers of refugees with 3.8 million people. If we look in the Asia region, there are 9.2 million under coordination of UNHCR. These numbers include 4.4 million refugees and asylum seekers, 3.3 million internally displaced people, and 2.3 million stateless persons. For information, there are more than 4 million refugees and asylum seekers in the Asia Pacific region, with about 180,000 currently registered in Malaysia. Since there is no valid status recognition for refugees, prospective refugees on arrive in Malaysia by sea or land, or considered party. Although they are view from NGOs to ask the government to accept the definition of refugee under the law, International Refugees Law, Immigration Department and the National Security Council expressed concern that the constitution would invite more refugees and Thais. The most common reason people become refugees in persecution, which can take many forms: religious, national, social, racist, racial, or political. However, in this current situation, most history refugees have been the direct or indirect products of war. The number of refugees keep growing, especially when the some war and conflict, especially the needs and the inspiration to survive. For that, I would like to quote the most highlighted by key point by our Yang Berhormat Tan Sri Zulkifli, Rector of UIAM, where he pointed out there is a missing element in the SDGs, which is a spiritual element that would governance of the right path in achieving all SDG element. In this case, the SDG goal for quality education. In conjunction with this event, we seek the new perspective of facilitating the educational platform for refugees, especially in Malaysia. Among the first speeches of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam when arrived in Medina, it was not for migration. Then I am one of the answer. If people go through one valley and the answer go through another valley or slope, I will surely go through the valley of the answer of the slope of the answer. That's how Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam stressed out the significance of facilitating the migration. Education in the right of all, regardless of race, color, poor, rich, refugee or population. Education is important for refugees so they can be out the status as refugees and become noble citizens. Protection for refugees in a shared responsibility. The primary responsibility rests with government to protect the right of everyone. It is a territory, including refugees. Even if the country is not party to the 1951 Convention relating to refugees. I would like to bring our message from President Nelson Mandela on Africa Refugees Day on 20 June 1997, when he mentioned that tributes must also be paid the international bodies, NGOs, and individuals whose tireless effort to solve the refugees problem have made an indelible mark on our continuous history. Yes, our continent today has the largest refugees problem in the world. Sadly, armed conflict and violation of human rights continue to be the fundamental cases. I think large-scale population displacement pose a threat of regional and continental peace and security. Unsolved refugees problem become a source in instability, violence, and for the population displacement. Tuan-tuan yang dirahmati Allah sekalian, saya terima kasih kepada semua yang hadir pada hari ini bersama untuk kita membincangkan satu perkara yang sangat besar bagi kita menyatakan bahawa pendidikan untuk refugees atau pelarian ini adalah pendidikan untuk masa depan manusia itu. Semua manusia berhak untuk mendapat hak sebagai orang yang dapat menuntut ilmu dan mencari pendidikan di mana saja mereka berada, walaupun mereka adalah seorang pelarian. Kita berbicara hari ini untuk lebih 89 juta pelarian di seluruh dunia, termasuklah kita yang berada di Malaysia hari ini. Terima kasih kepada semua, terima kasih yang setingginya kepada Datuk Seri Menteri bersama dengan seluruh para delegasi, bersama dengan NGO-NGO yang hadir, kawan-kawan saya daripada ahli parlimen, Alustar, ahli parlimen daripada APPJM, Bukit Bendera, Yang Berhormat ahli Adun daripada Terengganu, Yang Berhormat Ustaz Khalil, seluruhnya yang telah pun bersama hari ini. I think that's the end of my opening remarks today. I would like to thank you again for giving me a chance to convey the message through this platform. And I hope this agenda will bring to attention of the leaders in the world for that with pronunciation Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I open this high-level Roundtable of Refugees Education. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ustaz Tarmizi, for the speech. To continue our event, let me invite Professor Emeritus Tan Sri Datuk Zulkifli Abdul Razak, Director of the International Islamic University Malaysia, for his welcoming remarks. Please welcome.
Terima kasih. Yang berhormat Datuk Sri Saifuddin Abdullah, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Malaysia, Yang Amat Mulia Tuanku Zainal Abidin Ibnu Mukris, Mr. Thomas Andrews, United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Myanmar, Honorable Tan Sri Dr. Syed Hamid Alba, former Minister and Foreign Affairs of Malaysia, Yang berhormat Ustaz Tarmizi Sulaiman, Chairperson APPGM of Refugee Policy, Excellencies, Yang berhormat honorable guests, members of the media, participants, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Greeting of peace and salam sejahtera. Let me, of the offset, praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving us this opportunity to meet on a very auspicious occasion to talk about a refugee problem. I know it is not an easy problem, but certainly it is something that we need to discuss. And Alhamdulillah, we have commenced this meeting. Inshallah, we will go one step ahead after this discussion. I just want to make a very short comment as far as university is concerned. We are committed to the issue of refugee. And in fact, the testimony to this is a book that we have produced, and it is called The Bosnian Experience in Malaysia, Humanizing University. And this takes us back 30 years ago in 1992, when the university welcomed maybe about 100 refugees from Bosnia to study in university, and now all of them has gone back to sort of build whatever career or future of the nation in this. This is a book that is written by 18 of them, detailing or narrative what is it that they have gone through and how is it that it could be possible for them to learn and then go back to their own country. Our thinking is, if this is possible 30 years ago, with the Bosnian experience, I'm sure it is possible again to do this with the Rohingyas or whoever else. The template may be slightly different, but I think the initiative and also the commitment is the same. So I would like to put on record that this university is ready to take as many refugees as possible. In fact, we have been doing this on the side way, because there's many things that we need to circumvent, and somehow or other we think there must be some way of breaking this ice as far as the refugee and education is concerned. We believe education is this solution to this problem. With education, they can do a lot more, has been demonstrated in the Bosnian case. So on that note, I would like to thank all of you for coming here today, and hopefully we can work together in trying to realize this to the extent that we could. It may not be a worldwide problem, but at least it could be a sole solution for Malaysia. It could be a solution for this university, but we need to do something that shows that we are moving ahead. Otherwise, this issue will be circulating for many more years to come, and I think it will just get worse, as we see today with the pandemic and so on and so forth. So let me once again thank all of you for giving your time, your thoughts, and also your effort in trying to make this happen. Inshallah, we'll make dua that this will be realized as soon as possible. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Tan Sri, for your welcoming remarks. Members of the floor, now it is a great honor for me to invite Yang Berhormat Datuk Sri Saifuddin Abdullah, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Malaysia, for his keynote address. Please welcome.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera. Yang amat mulia Tunku Zainal Abidin, yang berbahagia Profesor Emeritus Tan Sri Datuk Zulkifli Abdul Razak, Mr. Thomas Andrews, kekanda saya Tan Sri Dr. Syed Hamid Alba, sahabat lama saya Dr. Mazli Malik, yang sana kanda yang ni sahabat. Yang berhormat Ustaz Tarmizi Sulaiman dan teman-teman ahli-ahli yang berhormat. Brothers and sisters, first and foremost, I must apologize for being late this morning. There's no excuse. You are late, you are late. I would like to congratulate the main organizers, the All-Party Parliamentary Group Malaysia, APPGM, on refugee policy, and the IIUM for taking the lead and initiatives in holding this event. And thank you for having me. It's always good to be back at a place that I can consider my alma mater. We all know the seriousness of the refugee problem. There are millions of them all over the world. For today, some of them have been refugees for as long as we can remember. For example, the Palestinians, the Rohingyas, yeah. And now we have new refugees coming from Ukraine. And they are now residing in many places, some in places that are probably quite familiar to them, some probably not very familiar to them. We commend all stakeholders and nation states that are taking in the refugees for resettlement. We normally know of the big countries, but I have the honor of visiting 3 not so big countries in the Nordic, and I'm very happy that the 2 ambassadors are here from Sweden and Norway. Well, the other country that I visited was Denmark. Yeah. But at the same time, we also have to take cognizance of the fact that there are some refugees that are treated better than the other refugees. So there is also a question of equity when it comes to the treatment of refugees. Not the fault of the refugees and the asylum seekers, but probably we need to ponder as to why this happened. Even the media sometimes give different kind of treatment to people in trouble. Some people got the kind of attention that other people doesn't seem to be getting that kind of attention, and some are probably almost forgotten, unfortunately. And that is why I think on days like this, the World Refugee Day, we should take stock of what is happening. We are not here to blame people. I'm just simply saying that there are issues that we have to look at. Today, we seek to honor and commemorate those who have been forced to flee war, violence, persecution, and threats to their lives and freedom. Many of them are even here amongst the audience today. It is perhaps difficult for us Malaysians living in the comfort of peace, security, and prosperity in our homeland to imagine why anyone would take great risks to their lives and the lives of their loved ones to leave their home behind and embark on difficult journeys across the borders. They have no way of knowing whether they will make it alive to their next destination, or whether what is waiting for them will be better than what they have left behind. But the choice is usually between a certain death and persecution back home and the glimmer of hope, however small, that perhaps somewhere, someplace, although that place may be very foreign to them, they could at least be treated as human beings, that they will not be killed, threatened, or arrested for being who they are or for their religious and political beliefs. We must also at the same time understand that in this kind of difficulties, there are other people who will take, how do you say it, an opportunity out of difficulties. And hence, sometimes we hear stories about human trafficking, drug pushing, and whatnot. And we should understand to differentiate between there are asylum seekers, there are people who are running for their life, and they are innocent people, while we understand that there are some people who manipulate the situation. And as government and as policymakers, we should not mix this and confuse ourselves with what is happening before our eyes. We must not be arrogant to think that this will never happen to us. I mean, Tan Sri Zul just mentioned about the Bosnian. I was the Joint Secretary of the Bosnian, what do we call it? Barisan Bertindak Bosnia, the Bosnian Action Front back in the 90s, when the genocide and ethnic cleansing was happening in Bosnia. I mean, as the Bosnian refugees who fled the ethnic cleansing and genocide in the Balkan Wars, and they will tell you that they have been living in peace and harmony, just like what we are today in Malaysia. Even if you continue to be blessed with peace, stability, and prosperity, do we turn a blind eye to the suffering of others? Sometimes I do wonder why so-called secular Western countries, three that I have mentioned earlier, somehow seem much more humane, sympathetic, and compassionate in their treatment of vulnerable groups, including towards Muslim refugees, compared to some Muslim countries. Surely this is not about the teaching of Islam. God says in the Quran, whoever saves a life, it is as though he had saved the lives of all mankind. Ustaz Tamizi was alluding to the time of the Prophet. During the early years of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the face of increasing threats to the lives and freedom of his family members and followers, the Prophet sent them to seek refuge with a Christian king in Abyssinia. The righteous king, after listening and giving due consideration to their plight, granted them security and protection, as well as the freedom to continue to practice their beliefs in the Christian kingdom. Even the concept of refugee protection has been entrenched in Islam since the very beginning of the Islamic civilization. The Prophet had introduced a concept of brotherhood between the immigrants and helpers in Medina, between the Muhajirin and the Ansar. He asked the helpers to share their houses with their brothers, and they did. In fact, the people in Medina offered so many things to the extent that the Prophet said, no, not everything, not your wife, for example. Yeah. They helped the refugees to establish themselves. It meant that those who left everything behind did not face the future alone. By his actions, the Prophet established a golden rule for the treatment of refugees. I'm also reminded of a verse from the Holy Quran, Surah An-Nisa, that applies to the situation where Muslims were being persecuted in Mecca, but they accepted the abuses and refused to move to another place where they can live with dignity and practice their faith freely. When the Muslims professed that they were oppressed in the land, the angels responded, "Was Allah's earth not spacious enough for you to emigrate?" As we can see, the Refugee Convention might be over 70 years old, but Islam has laid down the concept of refugee protection for more than 1,400 years ago. We all know that Malaysia is not a state party to the 1951 Refugees Convention and its 1967 protocol. And frankly, I do not foresee Malaysia joining the convention anytime soon, because that would require very strong political will and clear public support, but also extensive resources, specific expertise, and effective institution. So I guess for the time being, Malaysia will still continue to work with the UNHCR to do the best that we can. And I believe one of the things that we want to look at this morning is how can we do better in the management of refugees who are already in the country. We are currently hosting close to 200,000 refugees. For the past decades, we have allowed those seeking international protection to remain temporarily in the country as we provided them with assistance and facilitation. Most of them are hoping to eventually return to their country of origin, while some may want to resettle in a third country. However, while they wait to return for their home country or be resettled, most of them do not have adequate access to education. Out of the 200,000 UNHCR card holders, 40,000 of them are children. Only 30% of them have access to education, mainly through learning centers organized by NGOs and faith-based organizations. Some we call it ALCs, Alternative Learning Centers or Alternative Education Centers. There are ALCs for the Rohingyans, for example, organized by, among others, Jerat and Sejahtera. There is also the Jasmine Center for the refugees of Palestinian, Syrian, and Yemen origin, for example. The figure is even lower if we look at secondary education, and almost non-existent when it comes to tertiary education. I'm very thankful that Dr. Mazli is here. I remember the days when we were in the previous cabinet. Now you have to define which cabinet you are referring to. And we were discussing up to the level of teacher training and accreditation for those students who have completed and who have acquired certain level of education, knowledge and skills. Would love to hear that from you later. It is clearly not in our national interest to have a lost generation of refugee children in the country. The situation is not suitable for many reasons. If the refugees are lucky enough to return to their home country, they would not have the required skills and knowledge to support themselves and their families. Third countries are less likely to take in non or less educated refugees. And even if the refugees manage to be resettled in a third country, their lack of education may hinder them from proper assimilation and contributing to society. And if they remain for years or decades here in Malaysia, they would similarly not be able to contribute to our society or support their own livelihood. Instead, their lack of education makes them, open to other issues. As we have seen in various conflict areas in the world, refugees and asylum seekers are not going to go away anytime soon. Again, it is not their fault. So, as a government, I think we should join the international community in strengthening our legal and technical and governance capacities to manage the issue, and in particular to assist in areas like education. There is, of course, the other area of employment, which is even more complex, but I would limit myself to, at least for this morning, to stress on the importance of strengthening, facilitating the works of the civil society organizations, faith-based organizations in providing education to the children of refugees who are in Malaysia. I think for today's discussion, we have a list of impressive speakers and experts of various backgrounds to deliberate on the way forward in our refugee management policies, even some of our, perhaps some of our legal issues, focusing on the area of education. So, brothers and sisters, I'm looking forward to hearing more from all of you, and we hope that at the end of the day, we could probably come up with some kind of concrete proposals as to what the government should be doing, and also how can all stakeholders be working together closely. I understand that there are, as I said, experts from various backgrounds. There are also institutions of higher learning who are ever willing to come forward to assist. And I thank you all for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Yang Berhormat Datuk Sri Saifuddin, for the keynote address. We will continue our event today with the address of our special guest. With that, I am delighted to invite Mr. Thomas Andrews, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Myanmar. Please welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Happy World Refugee Day. It is an honor to be here this morning and to join His Excellency, the Foreign Minister, and the many distinguished guests who I'm honored to be with this morning. I want to thank the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Refugees for the opportunity to join you on World Refugee Day and for working in partnership with committed civil society organizations to promote fairness, equality, dignity, and hope for refugees. I served as a member of a parliamentary body for a dozen years, and I have led human rights and social justice advocacy organizations for more years than I will say, because it will reveal how old I actually am. So I appreciate and applaud the willingness of the Malaysian parliamentarians to tackle challenging but extremely important issues, and congratulate you for the wisdom of joining with important civil society organizations to develop proposals and collaborate to move these proposals forward. It is therefore a particular honor to join you on World Refugee Day. World Refugee Day recognizes the landmark signing of the 1951 Convention relating to the status of refugees, the convention builds on the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights that declares everyone has the right to seek and to enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution. The convention defines a refugee as someone who is unable or unwilling to return to their country of nationality owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion. And through the principle of non-refoulement, the agreement holds that no state can expel or return, that is, refoul a refugee to a territory where their life or freedom would be threatened. The convention's binding principle of non-refoulement is now considered a rule of customary international law. World Refugee Day is a time to pause and celebrate the resilience and courage of refugees, and to recognize the fact that refugees have a fundamental right to life and to make a future possible for themselves and their families. You are taking this step, this is taking this a step further by not only recognizing the fundamental rights of refugees, but forging answers and creating solutions to the most critical life and death challenges facing refugees. The theme globally for World Refugee Day this year is the right to seek safety. I cannot think of any group of people for whom this theme is more appropriate than for those who have fled and continue to flee the horrific violence inflicted by the Myanmar junta and its forces. Since the February 2021 military coup, the junta, led by Senior General Min Aung Hlaing, has carried out a ruthless campaign of violence and oppression against the people of Myanmar. Junta forces have killed nearly 2,000 civilians, arrested more than 14,000, displaced more than 700,000, and plunged the country into an economic and humanitarian crisis that threatens the lives and well-being of millions. Last week, I published a report on what the military coup has meant for Myanmar's children. In a word, it has meant disaster. Military attacks on civilian populations have displaced more than 250,000 children, who join the roughly 130,000 children in protracted displacement and the more than 500,000 child refugees from Myanmar in neighboring countries. The junta has arbitrarily detained over 1,400 children, with at least 61 children currently being held as hostages. Junta forces have tortured at least 142 children since the coup was launched. These children have been beaten, cut, stabbed. They've been burned with cigarettes, forced to hold stress positions, subjugated to mock executions, deprived of food and water. It is projected that an estimated 33,000 children will die of preventable deaths this year alone, merely because they have not received routine immunizations. 1.3 million children and more than 700,000 pregnant and breastfeeding women are in need of nutritional support. 7.8 million children remain out of school. This, ladies and gentlemen, is unconscionable. The relentless attacks on Myanmar's children underscore the depths of the military junta's depravity and its willingness to inflict immense misery and hardship on innocent victims to try and subjugate the people of Myanmar. Of course, the military's crimes against the people of Myanmar predates the coup. For example, the genocidal attacks against the Rohingya Muslim minority by Myanmar security forces have created over 1 million Rohingya refugees. I have learned that there are over 104,000 registered Rohingya who have fled to this country seeking a safe haven, with untold numbers who are unregistered. I have met with some of them already on my current trip to Malaysia. In fact, I've had the pleasure to meet with dozens of Myanmar refugees in the few days that I have been here, including refugees from Shan, Kachin, Rohingya, Chin, Rakhine, and Burman refugees. I have spoke with refugees who have been here for years and those who have been here for a matter of weeks. What they have in common is that they have fled Myanmar for the very reasons that make people refugees. Many, if not all, face death threats or certain imprisonment if they were to return to Myanmar. I have spoken with refugees who personally witnessed protesters being murdered or watched as members of their community were killed when soldiers indiscriminately dropped bombs on their homes. I have spoken with protesters themselves who have been detained by junta forces and tortured while in detention. Indeed, the escalating numbers of refugees in Malaysia is directly linked to the deteriorating conditions in Myanmar. That is why the solution to the refugee crisis is not here in Malaysia. It is in Myanmar. His Excellency, the Foreign Minister, not only recognizes this fact, he has been willing to challenge his ASEAN colleagues to re-examine their current policy on the crisis, to move, in his words, from a policy of non-interference to one of non-indifference. We are all familiar with ASEAN's 5-point consensus. The Foreign Minister has given voice to the obvious fact that after more than 1 year, nothing has moved. And since nothing has moved, more people are being killed and more people are being forced to leave the country. And he has implored his ASEAN colleagues to not wait for another year of inaction, to not just talk about the 5-point consensus, but create and engage an action plan to move that consensus forward, an action plan with a time frame for implementation. He has not only called for ASEAN to engage with the Myanmar National Unity Government, he has taken the lead by meeting with the National Unity Government's foreign minister. And he is the first among his ASEAN colleagues to welcome me into his country and to discuss the crisis and what can and be done about it. Thank you, Your Excellency. If more countries had the vision and the good sense taken here in Malaysia to take the approach that is being taken in Malaysia with respect to this crisis in Myanmar, today we would not be noting, and today we would be noting and discussing progress and how to build on that progress, not lamenting the growing cost of inaction in the form of a growing refugee crisis. The fact remains that progress on the crisis in Myanmar will help create the conditions necessary for Myanmar refugees who are now in Malaysia to do what they desperately want to do, to go home. But in the meantime, we should all feel a responsibility to ensure that the children of those who have been forced to flee persecution in Myanmar are provided an education. The title of my special report to the UN Human Rights Council on children in Myanmar is entitled Losing a Generation. Indeed, a generation of children is being lost in Myanmar. Their future and their country's future is in grave jeopardy. As we celebrate World Refugee Day today and focus in this roundtable on moving the agenda of refugee education forward, let us commit ourselves to doing everything in our power to ensure that Myanmar refugee children do not also become a lost generation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas, for your address. Ladies and gentlemen, the event today will be continued with the presentation of gifts by our fellow VIPs. First, I would like to invite Professor Emeritus Tan Sri Datuk Zulkifli Abdul Razak, Director of the International Islamic University Malaysia, to give a token of appreciation to Yang Berhormat Datuk Sri Saifuddin Abdullah, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Malaysia. Please welcome. Thank you, Tan Sri. Next, I would like to invite Yang Berhormat Ustaz Tarmizi bin Sulaiman, the Chair of APPGM on Refugee Policy, accompanied by Mazid and Malak, the refugee students from Syria, to give a token of appreciation to Yang Berhormat Datuk Sri Saifuddin Abdullah, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Malaysia. Please welcome. Next, let me invite Yang Berhormat Ustaz Tarmizi bin Sulaiman to give a token of appreciation to Yang Amat Mulia Tunku Zainal Abidin Ibni Tuanku Muhriz, the founding president of the Institute for Democracy and Economic Affairs Ideas. Please welcome. And lastly, let me invite Yang Berhormat Ustaz Tarmizi bin Sulaiman to give a token of appreciation to our rector. Please welcome. Thank you to all the VIPs. Members of the floor, now it is time for the main agenda of today's event, which is the roundtable discussion. As mentioned previously, this high-level roundtable will be on refugee education, moving the agenda forward, where 4 main topics will be discussed today. The topics include, number 1, refugee education as part of inclusive education. Number 2, the increasing access to primary and secondary education. Number 3, the increasing access to tertiary and vocational education. And lastly, the partnerships and mechanism for funding, coordination, and monitoring progress. With that, I will